I have never followed an 11-year-old on the podium. But I must say I'm inspired. In fact, I think it's a privilege to follow both the speakers of today because they allowed me to see the world with different eyes. And I want you to take the next 20 minutes or so to see the world from a different vantage point of view. And to do that, I'm going to make 3 controversial statements. First statement, talent, despite the opinion to the contrary, is actually abundant, not scarce. Second statement, intelligence is increasingly a commodity. And the third statement, leadership, therefore, is the key differentiator. So let me start by explaining each of these with some examples. First, talent is actually abundant and not scarce. A few years ago, I used to be in a business with GE called GE Aviation. We are dominant in the world of jet engines. Many of you must have traveled on our engine sometime or the other, and maybe even to this, this forum here. The most important thing about the jet engine is the weight of the engine. If you reduce the weight of engine, it allows you to have better fuel efficiency, and that means a lot. At least a couple of years ago, it meant a lot when the oil prices were much higher than what it is today. But it still means a lot for airlines. So we had actually come up with cutting-edge materials, technology, advanced materials that allowed us to reduce the weight of a jet engine, say, from 15,000 pounds to 12,000 pounds. The problem was we were finding it difficult to reduce the weight of the bracket that held the engine onto the wing. How do we reduce the weight of that bracket? That bracket would roughly be weighing about 2,100, 2,200 grams. And our endeavor was to try and reduce the weight proportionate to the weight that we were planning to reduce for the engine. So we tried all new technologies. Some of the best brains in the world were working at it. People from MIT, Stanford, Georgia Tech, what have you, PhDs. Unfortunately, we were not very successful. That's when one of our colleagues hit upon the idea, why don't we ask the world to give us some thoughts on this? So we went to one of the firms that was involved in open source innovation and asked them to run an open innovation contest for us. We said, all right, let's see how this works. Maybe we should not spend too much. Let's give them $20,000. Anybody who wins this can get $20,000, but we want designs for the bracket that would be at least 33% lighter than what we currently have. So this was the contest. We released the contest. We had 700 applications from 56 countries. And the winning design was from a place called Salatiga, Indonesia. And the winner was a 22-year-old diploma engineer who ran a motorcycle mechanic shop with his brother. And there were several other good designs, but the top 10 designs together got $20,000, and Ari Surawan, who won the contest, got $7,000. Under no circumstances, any spec we designed for the right kind of talent would have hired Ari. He wouldn't have made the cut. He's not a PhD from MIT or Stanford. He didn't have aerospace engineering. He didn't have the pedigree that we all look for normally. He didn't have the experience. He hasn't had many patents to his credit. But Ari was the one who figured out. His design reduced the weight of the bracket not by 33%, which is what we wanted, but by 84%. So it tells you that talent is out there. And it's our approach to finding the talent that is scarce, not the talent itself. And the question is, how do we change, re-engineer our frame of thinking, our frame of connecting with the talent as opposed to owning the talent that allows us to leverage them? Because we have all been brought up on the 20th century notion of the fact that talent is scarce. Another example, those of you who may have interest in medicine and pharmacy may have heard of this case. A 14-year-old kid, Jack Andraka, came up with a way to test for pancreatic cancer. His test cost 3 cents, about 26,000 times cheaper than the next costliest test. And he was going off his high school biology class. It again tells you that you have geniuses out there. Talent is out there. How you tap into them, how you scout for them, how you spot them is not something we are fully clued into. Our techniques are still very old. So that's one. The second statement I made was intelligence is increasingly a commodity. Not that it's unimportant. Intelligence is very important. But it's increasingly a commodity. Every year at GE, we host a mid-market summit in Columbus, Ohio. And last year, we had about 2,000 participants to the summit. The audience was there for 2 days, and they were really enjoying themselves. We had a host of speakers, including Mrs. Clinton and so on and so forth. During the afternoon session, we actually had booths for various vendors to show their products and services. What we noticed was in one corner of the room, there was one booth that was particularly very popular. There were a lot of people flocking to the booth and asking for help, and you had people there serving the folks who were attending the summit. When we looked at what these folks were offering, we were surprised. If you have not heard of it, you should try and Google it or go to the website. It's called www.arlynerd.com. Arlynerd.com consists of MBA students or folks who have done their masters who are offering their services. You don't need to go to a high-end consulting company. Instead, what you can say is, I need somebody to help me out with the project. And the project could be, what is the digital strategy for an insurance company in Dallas? Or what should we think of from a Brazilian healthcare point of view? Or how should we think about oil and gas? Anything you want. And what you can do is, I have this project, and my budget is $500, $6,000, whatever be your budget, you can specify. And then the database of project providers in arlynerd.com will get in touch with you. Maybe 5 of them will get in touch with you. And you can choose, based on the credentials other clients have written them on. And you can give them the project. In 2 days' time, or whatever be the time limit you set, they come back with the project, and you can rate them. And that adds to the repertoire of skills and credentials that the person builds up. A couple of things that are unique. Of course, it gives kids who are doing their MBAs terrific practice. But one thing I noticed was that a lot of the providers were not necessarily people who were at school. They'd actually gone through school. Many of them were stay-at-home moms and found this as a venue to offer their expertise. It tells you that intelligence is out there. You don't need to have it in-house. You need to know how to access it. You need to make sure that you tap into it. And that you can do by paying by the drink. You don't need to actually employ them in-house. You can actually pay them by the drink and open up the tap. And today it's MBAs, tomorrow it can be lawyers, tomorrow, day after tomorrow it can be accountants. I'm sure this is only going to spread when you figure out there are ways of tapping into intelligence out there that you don't need to actually have in-house. But that's not the only issue about intelligence. Also add to the fact that increasingly, machines are taking over thinking. And you all know it. For instance, you all now know it's only a matter of time that a self-driven automobile is going to actually work on our roads. When that happens, when Google or Tesla or any of these companies do that, think about what will happen to the 4 million people who are involved in the transportation work today in the US. If you expand that across the world, there are about 70 million people who are drivers. What would happen to their work? Why would you need them? Why would you need the cops who are ready to spot whether you're texting and driving or whether you're driving drunk? You don't need them. There is nobody who's going to be drinking and driving. The car takes over. And for the first time, you realize the true meaning of automobile, because automobile, it's not human mobile. So you can see that intelligence is increasingly available in machines. And when we did our minds and machines work last year, the fact that you now can combine physical assets and digital assets comes up with astounding possibilities in terms of what you can do with the two together. Exponential leverage you can get through that. When that happens, you realize that over a period of time, you don't need the kind of people you have currently. For instance, some folks now think about the fact that if all surgery is going to be done by doctors or by robots, do you really need doctors in the future? Do you really need doctors who may not actually be as careful as those mechanical machines that could perform surgery on you? You know that the human genome sequence is getting cheaper and cheaper, and by 2020 it's going to be a few cents. You may not need to go to a physician at all. So with these kind of advances, and when Watson can win Jeopardy or win against international chess masters, you know it's only a matter of time when human intelligence actually is smaller than machine intelligence. And when that happens, you know that machines will be faster, certainly smarter than what we provide. If that's the case, intelligence and knowledge is increasingly a commodity. So two arguments. Talent is abundant, intelligence is a commodity. If that's the case, what is the true differentiator? And my argument is leadership. A few months ago, one of my colleagues went to a business school and sat down. We actually had the presentation start at 6:30 in the evening. The recruiter was there at 6 o'clock. As she went into the forum, she found one student already there, working away hard, diligently on his iPad in the top right-hand corner of the auditorium. So she goes up to him and introduces herself, saying that I'm from GE. You're obviously up here and early. You must be very interested in us. He turned around and said, not really. My professor said that GE is an extremely important company. I want to make sure that they feel that the auditorium is full, so go and sit down. So she says, why? If you're not interested in GE, why did you come? I said, I want to get a good grade. So my professor said, you'll get a good grade if you come. He said, let me know about your background. He says, actually, I don't even qualify to be eligible to apply. Let me tell you why. You look for a minimum 3.0 GPA. My GPA is 2.7. Therefore, I'm out of the loop anyway. And she says, you 2.7? Why? He says, listen, honestly, I only focused on the subjects I was passionate about. And those subjects, I got a 4.0. The subjects I was not interested in, I didn't even write an exam, or if I wrote them half-heartedly, I got a D or an F. And therefore, my average was 2.7. Oh, tell me something about your story. He goes on to say, I had a brother in the war whom we lost. And that made me realize that I need to serve. I need to save lives. So my interest is in the biomedical field. So I have 2 patents to produce prosthetics for wounded veterans. And I've got a couple of nonprofit organizations that I'm using to fund the prosthetics that I'm trying to make for these veterans. Now let me ask you, you walk back, you think, okay, this person doesn't have a 3.0 GPA. This person ostensibly is not interested in you, but would you want to hire this person? And most people will say yes, because you realize that there is a commitment to a purpose. There is certainly a dedication and a focus, like we saw in either Deborah or Vivian this morning. Focus, wanting to give back to the society. And those are precious traits that you want to hire for. So we did hire the individual, and he's still there in the company. It made us realize of one thing. Leadership is not positionship. It is not about where you are in the hierarchy. It's about the contribution and impact you can make at any level. And that's why we've changed our stance to look at leaders at all levels, which means that you need to reverse your thinking. When we look at leaders today, or anybody whom you want to hire into the company, you start by saying, okay, here's the checklist. GPA, yes or no. Then you look for some cognitive skills, analytical skills, problem-solving skills. Then you come to the emotional side of things, okay? Interpersonal skills, team playing, and then you may look at some traits, hardworking, loyal. That goes away. We actually start with the core of the individual. We need to make sure we look at what the individual's passions are that the person brings, because intelligence is a commodity. You can always buy that. What you cannot buy in adequate measure are those unique passions of the individual, and that is what leadership is all about. So we started exploring what does this mean for us. And we found that there were 5 things that we need to really look for when hiring talent. Number 1, the hunger to win. How hungry are you to win? The intense motivation you have in driving forward with your purpose. Second, integrity and transparency. It's not just adequate to be a person of high integrity. It's also important these days in an open world for that to be transparent. Others need to make sure that they vouch for your integrity. The third thing is accountability. Responsibility is what others give you. Accountability is how you own the space others give you. And how do you make sure that you feel accountable for delivering for yourself and for the organization? Fourth, resilience and grit. The ability to withstand the roller coaster ride that all of us go through often. Every organization is permanently in a state of emergency or in a permanent state of transformation. I hear about the fact that I'm going through a transformation all the time. So how do you make sure that you have the resiliency and the grit to go through that ride? And finally, are you a learner? The 20th century word was, are you a knowledge worker? With knowledge becoming obsolete every day, you got to be a learning worker and not just a knowledge worker. So those are the 5 things that we look for when we're starting to hire for people. We don't necessarily have easy mechanisms to do so. We have very easy mechanisms to test for intellect. And that should continue. It's not that you should discard that. But that's only the entry ticket. That's only the starting point, not the end point. How do you really explore and measure for these core traits becomes very significant. Not just that, you then need to make sure you unlock other things. And what we look for as we groom the individual through his or her career is the follows. Are you an authentic person? And the definition of authenticity is where self-confidence meets self-awareness. If your self-confidence is more than self-awareness, then you're a jerk. If your self-awareness is more than your self-confidence, that perhaps are too tentative, not assertive enough. How do you intersect the two perfectly is where authenticity lies. Second, judgment. These days, you cannot depend on process to do your work. It's got to be your judgment. It's got to be your call, and you knowing the risk and reward equation cleverly and clearly. Third, are you a pioneer and a visionary? Are you willing to stand up for your convictions? Are you willing to break the mold? Are you willing to stand apart despite the headwinds that may follow? Fourth, are you decisive? Can you make a call? And fifth, are you edgy? Because the world consists of people who are willing to break the paradigm. And paradigms are broken by those people who are, in some ways, unique, mildly put. So those are the things that we try and groom for in our leaders today. Not just the intellect, but the basic core traits of a good leader. Now, to wrap up, it's not just enough for you to think about leaders and look at their traits. The bigger question is, when they come into our organization, will they stay? How do we transform the organizational environment to facilitate the attraction and retention of such people? Because we now know that if you come with these qualities of leaders, unless your organization is receptive and welcoming of those traits and provides the context for these people to flourish, they're going to leave you. So we actually have changed our talent reviews to people reviews. And the subtle difference is talent review is what we wanted from the talent. But the concept of people review is, if I were to put myself in the shoes of the 27-year-old who's walking into the company today, do I have the environment that allows me to aspire and live my dreams in the company? So to conclude, Information technology has changed a lot. Technology has moved a lot of things. We all know that. What I feel is the management side of technology has not changed much. It's time for us to reframe what leadership is all about and rewire our worldview of leaders through the lens of what today we have in terms of technology and the talent and the intelligence, and more importantly, the difference that people can make to your organization. We saw that in Deborah, we saw that in Vivian, and that's the passion we need to light in all our people. Thank you very much.